From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. We begin in Ecuador, where people took to the streets in memory of the two journalists and their driver, kidnapped near the border with Colombia and killed last week. Demonstrators gathered in San Francisco Square, in the historic center of the capital city, Quito. They condemned the violence at the national border with Colombia and demanded the release of a couple who were also recently kidnapped in the same area. Protesters wore white as a sign of peace and unity. The dialogue between the government of Colombia and the ELN was affected after the president of Ecuador, Lenin Moreno, decided to stop hosting negotiation talks. Nonetheless, both parties have reaffirmed that they will continue working to reach a peace agreement.
Ecuadorian President Lenin Moreno announced that Ecuador is canceling its guarantor status in dialogue between Colombia's government and ELN. Moreno cited the volatile situation on the border with Colombia as the reason for the move. But could there be more behind this decision?
I think he couldn't stand the pressure of Ecuadorian public opinion. Another factor is that there is an inner conflict with former President Correa. Moreno thought that this was Correa's legacy and wanted to get rid of it.
For León Valencia, director of the Foundation Peace and Reconciliation, this wasn't the most appropriate diplomatic decision. However, he considers that the negotiations will continue regardless.
Both sides agree that if this fifth stage of negotiations goes well, they might well achieve a bilateral agreement for peace. They are working on a model of citizens' participation that will leave everything settled for the next generation.
For social organizations, this is completely necessary.
I think that Ecuador's government didn't think about their decision long enough. Ecuador has always supported Colombia's peace, and Colombian peace is the whole region's peace. I think that it should have been the main priority.
All of this indicated that agreements must be reached soon.
We will continue with our regular activities. The government said that the negotiation with the ELN is important, and we trust that the ELN also said that are totally willing to keep going on with this, and we expect them to keep with their word. The talks won't stop.
Now the question on everyone's mind is which of the other guarantor countries will receive these negotiations. Of all of them, Chile looks like the most likely step up.
José Manuel Jiménez, Telesur, Bogotá, Colombia.
And still in Colombia, the Supreme Court has denied FARC member Jesus Santrich his request of habeas corpus. The judge in charge of the case, Octavio Augusto Trejo, determined Santrich's arrest was done according to the law. So he will remain in prison until his case is solved. His legal team will try to prevent his extradition to the United States. Santrich was arrested for drug trafficking at the request of the DEA, which is the Drug Enforcement Administration, via the United States Embassy in Colombia. And Colombia's government will strengthen police numbers in the country during the presidential election on May 27th. Around 165,000 policemen will oversee every voting center in the country. The government is also putting in place a special commission to fight cyber attacks on election day. This announcement was made by the President, Juan Manuel Santos, after meeting with the National Commission of Electoral Guarantees. And the period of electoral silence has begun in Paraguay. During their campaign closing ceremonies, the presidential candidates from the country's two leading parties expressed their desire to win the elections.
On the last day of his electoral campaign, presidential candidate Efraín Alegre appeared confident of an upcoming victory. Alegre promised that the youth will be a priority for his government.
We're going to take the Paraguayan young people to university, not to military bases.
Alegre insisted that his administration will tackle corruption and will lower energy costs. Paraguay's former president, Fernando Lugo, who was overthrown during a coup in 2012 and now leads the left-wing party Frente Guaso within the Ganar Alliance, is one of Alegre's supporters.
The Ganar Alliance celebrates pluralism. We recognize our country as multicultural.
government's party held its campaign closing ceremony 30 kilometers outside of the city of Asunción. Like Alegre, conservative candidate Mario Abdo Benítez also showed great confidence in his victory. During his speech, he vindicated his father, who was linked to the 35-year-long Stroessner dictatorship, a regime guilty of assassinations, human rights violations, torture, and the disappearance of people.
I have a connection with the city of Itagua because my father left a mark here, building a great school. I will strengthen his legacy in honor of the youth. But I will also leave my mark because, God willing, I will obtain a great victory here just like in the rest of the country.
Over 4 million people will cast their ballot on Sunday, in a country where voting is mandatory but absenteeism is not penalized.
The 5 candidates in Venezuela's presidential election will begin campaigning on Sunday. Meanwhile, the National Electoral Council is continuing with the preparations for the vote on May 20th. Our correspondent Freddie Gillingham has the latest from Caracas.
So we've now got just less than 2 days away until the official political campaigning begins here in Venezuela for the presidential elections of 2018. Those are scheduled to be beginning on the 22nd. They will be running until May 17th. However, the last-minute preparations are all very much being implemented. The CNE has been kept very, very busy. Yesterday, a whole set of auditing for these machines for the electoral system has got underway. That's also going to be happening again on Monday. Of course, there have been pre-election campaigning events in various pockets of the capital, but also in other parts of the country. An atmosphere has been building. Maduro has been out in the streets, as has Henry Falcon, one of the leading opposition presidential candidates in this election. Those two are the two main favourites. Maduro has about 10 political parties backing him. Falcon only has 4. He is the underdog. However, it's early stages. Anything can happen. There will be 5 presidential candidates who will be campaigning. That will be beginning 2 days from now. President Nicolas Maduro is expected to give a press conference around 4 p.m. today, where he will be addressing the nation at this very important time in the electoral calendar.
Thank you, Freddie, for that report. Social and political leaders continue to arrive in Curitiba, Brazil, where former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is in prison. On Thursday, popular theologist Leonardo Boff and the Nobel Peace Prize winner from Argentina, Adolfo Pérez Esquivel, tried to visit Lula, but a judge prevented the reunion between the 3 longtime friends. Social movements have criticized the imprisonment of Lula, saying he is isolated and he should be classed as a political prisoner. We're going to take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. A special meeting of the British House of Commons has been held to discuss the Windrush scandal. Among the issues discussed was the confirmation that an official debate on the matter will take place in Parliament on April 30th. Throughout the meeting, attendees were encouraged to contact their members of Parliament with their concerns and proof of the challenges facing the members of the Windrush generation as they fight to prove that they are in fact legal British citizens. Speaking at the meeting, Labour MP David Lammy spoke of the debt that the UK owes its citizens of Caribbean origin.
Because the Caribbean and the West Indies didn't just come about by accident. The relationship between this country and our people is indelible. It is a bond that goes back 400 years. When we think of the Windrush children, we cannot think of the Windrush children without also thinking of Windrush ancestors. And so our story begins when ships brought Africans from the continent of Africa to the Caribbean.
And now we go live to Chantal Miller. She's the founder of Island Girls Rock, a network for Caribbean women in London. She attended that special House of Commons meeting about the Windrush scandal, and she joins us now live. Hi, Chantal. Thank you so much for joining us. So tell me, what were some of the important takeaways from yesterday's meeting at the House of Commons?
Hi, thanks for having me. I think for me, one of the most important takeaways was that we cannot allow this issue to be swept under the rug, as it were, and we have to keep what is happening in the public's mindset. We have to push our local MPs. We have to contact the media with our individual stories and encourage persons to do so. This is vital. This is important. This is not something that we can actually afford to be polite about. That was one of my biggest takeaways.
Now, I know you do a lot of work with the Caribbean community in London. Tell me, how has this affected Caribbean-born English people, and is there widespread feeling of insecurity? And of course, let me just let my audiences know, you are third-generation Windrush, aren't you?
I am indeed. My mother was sent for when she was 6 years old by her parents, who were asked to come to this country to rebuild after the Second World War. So I am indeed third generation.
And talk to me about how the community is feeling, how they're coping with the fallout of this scandal.
We are angry. We are disenfranchised. We are frustrated. It's such a melange of feelings, Soyini. It's anger. It's hurt. You know, as I think it was Diane Abbott said last night. You know, the Windrush generation are some of the most patriotic British citizens that you would ever find. And it's so true. You know, if I don't stand to attention during the national anthem, even if it's been played in my grandmother's house, the looks that I get are serious. So, you know, to have this come up, to feel that all the work that they've contributed to rebuilding this country has been taken for granted, it's like a slap in the face, really. And so the community is angry, and we're hoping to harness that anger into action.
And talk to me a little bit about that action. What is the community doing to help itself cope with the fallout and help those who may have been deported or being threatened with deportation cope with what's happening?
Right, so we have a very poor network connection right now, and that is purely my fault and where I'm based at the moment. But I think you were asking, what does that action look like? I got that much.
Yes, that's exactly what I asked.
Okay, okay, great. So I got most of it. You know, the action looks like, you know, calling on our immigration experts within the community, and even without, to be honest, you know, anyone who is willing to help with their legal expertise, because this is where, you know, this is where the action is to be taken. This is how we get to the root of the problem, by tackling it from a legislative and strategic approach. You know, yes, emotions are important. It's important for us to feel that this is something that we have to do, but we need the expertise. So it's really about calling out to that section of our community to step forward and to help. There are cases pending. There will be more cases, and we just need that expertise.
Thank you so much, Chantal, for chatting with us about that House of Commons meeting that happened yesterday. We're going to stay in touch with you just to find out how this case has been going, because we've been covering it extensively. So we move from Chantal Miller in London, and we're going to go to Pablo Navarrete. The treatment of the Windrush generation immigrants has provoked anger among many black people in Britain. And Pablo is actually at a protest in Brixton at the moment, which is just about to begin, so we're going to talk to him about it. Pablo, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you're hearing me. Give me a little nod. Tell me what is happening at the moment at that protest.
So we're in Brixton in South London, one of the centres of the Caribbean community in London and in Britain. And in a few minutes, a protest will begin that will run for 2 hours, organised by Stand Up for Racism, an activist group fighting racism, and we will be attended by various writers, journalists, the opposition the Labour Party Home Secretary, Diana Abbott, will be attending. And it is a coming together of various strands of British society. As you say, this Windrush scandal has caused widespread anger, not only in the Caribbean community, but in the wider society. People are truly shocked at how the sons and daughters of this Windrush generation who were asked to come, or who were invited to Britain after the Second World War, have been left by the British government in a state of limbo, often stateless. And we are hearing, primarily through the Guardian newspaper, very tragic stories of how members of these children have often been unable to find jobs, have been sacked from jobs, have been left homeless. One mother even said that her son, the stress of this situation has contributed to her son's death last month. So the Theresa May government is under increasing pressure to find answers to explain how this has happened to the approximate 60,000 Caribbean people who are affected, 1 in every 1,000 people in Britain. So it's a scandal of a significant magnitude.
Quick question, Pablo. The British government has apologized for what it called its mistakes. Is that apology reaching the people? Are the people satisfied with that apology?
I was filming here in Brixton 2 days ago, on Wednesday, for a video report that will come out shortly and tell us all English. And I got the sense that this apology was not being accepted. It's not simply, people here do not see this as simply as a mistake. But we must remember that Theresa May was Home Secretary a couple of years ago, and she called for a policy to make immigration for people to feel uncomfortable in Britain. So it seems to be more of a policy designed by the government rather than a mistake, which is what the government is now stating that it is. So I don't think people are willing to accept the government's apologies at the moment, and they want real answers, and they want the government they want to know how many people have been forced to leave the country, and what the state of, and how these people will effectively regain their British citizenship.
Well, you're talking about they want real answers. How do the protesters think that the issue should be resolved?
I mean, I think there are various options. The Labour Party has been very critical of the Conservative government. Obviously, Theresa May tried to blame the Labour itself, but this turns out to be not the case, it seems. There are no real concrete answers, but the first step has to be that the Home Office tells us how many people truly are affected, how their process will be regularised. They have promised to do this, but there are still cases of people who are unable to get NHS treatment because of their stateless state, effectively.
Thank you so much for that report. We've been talking to Pablo Navarrete. He is our London correspondent, and he is actually at a protest that's about to begin in Brixton about the Windrush scandal, and we're going to expect a report from him on the actual protest in a later newscast. Other news now. Demonstrations are taking place in Nicaragua over the social security system reforms being proposed by their government. People for and against the reforms have protested for 2 consecutive days in the capital of Managua. Government supporters are asking the protesters to end the demonstrations without violence. Authorities have said the demonstrations against the reforms of the social security system are a political manipulation and an attempt to destabilize the country. We're going to take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
Let me take this opportunity to warn our people publicly about the wrong practices indulged in and promoted by some of the outsiders. One of them is what they call oral sex. The mouth is for eating, not for sex. for eating onkuria.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa had to leave the Commonwealth Summit in the UK to deal with a major protest back home. People have been demonstrating in Mahikeng, a town in the country's northwest province. The protesters are demanding jobs, better housing, and the construction of roads and hospitals. They're also asking for the resignation of the province's premier, who belongs to Ramaphosa's African National Congress Party. We're being joined live by the chairperson of the Economic Freedom Fighters in the Northwest Province in South Africa. Her name is Betty Dial. Oh, okay, sorry. Betty is joining us now on the phone. What can you tell us about the situation in Mahikeng, Betty, and why are the people protesting?
Thank you very much. Greetings to you and greetings to the viewers. The situation now in Mahikeng is that it's very tense and volatile. There's a lot of protest that's going on in Mahikeng, the nearest town, Ziras, as well as Delareyville. The communities are up in arms. They want the resignation of the premier of the province, Supra Mahumapelo, who was elected by the ANC. They also are complaining about the lack of service delivery in the province. They don't have basic services such as healthcare, as well as medication in the healthcare facilities. They are also complaining about very bad roads that we are having in the province of Northwest. There's a lot of corruption that was exposed recently, which relates to the upfront payments of funds to service providers who did not do the work a year after they were paid millions of rands by the government.
So, Betty, I want you to help me understand. I understand that there have been a lot of protests in South Africa over service delivery. Why are these protests so different, and why have they become a national issue?
You know, it is the issue of corruption related. It's happening nationally, but in the Northwest Province, it is worse because there's an exposure of a lot of corruption, upfront payments, frauding the laws of accounting in our province, money being paid particularly to a company that is linked to the Guptas who are in the country of South Africa, alleged to be engaged in a lot of corruption within government offices in various provinces of the country. Now, in the Northwest, it is clear that the Supra or the Premier is linked to the Gupta family, and he is, along with the Gupta, being engaged in corruption.
So, Betsy, we heard that President Ramaphosa may have reached Mahikeng to meet with the protesters today. Are you able to tell us if he was able to meet them, and how is him meeting the protesters going to help the situation?
Okay, as we speak now, the president of the country is locked in a meeting along with the premier, the deployees of the ANC, on the national deployees to the province, as well as members of the legislature. They are locked in a meeting. We don't have reports yet as to the outcome. We are awaiting at this stage any outcome from that meeting.
Thank you so much, Betty Dial. Betty is the chairperson of the Economic Freedom Fighters, and she's been talking to us about that protest taking place in Mahikeng in South Africa. Now, Palestinians have been demonstrating along the Israeli-Gaza border for the fourth consecutive week. The protests are planned to last 6 weeks, so with the biggest events usually take place on Fridays. Palestinians have adopted a new tactic of building kites with Molotov cocktails attached, and they're sending them into Israel with messages saying there is no place for you in Palestine. At least 34 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces since March 30th. And that report has taken us right to the end of this newscast, but for these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telusyourtv.net/English. You can also join us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesay English, I'm Sweeney Gray. Thank you so much for watching.